당좀 당은 줄야 동아유다 대기세다 동아세디게 다쳐서 셈두다 무디게 토네 아니 대기야도 동아용고레스 아주 셈마도 와셔도 셈마도 와라도 셈녀모 부셔 송아시거와 되자 공로가야라서 바다 디니게 남이야라서 베게바는 셈마도 와세 지산 델라테네 셈마도 와라테네 테네 아주 동아야 규디 디츠규인자 델라테네 동아용고레지로와 셈두와라 테네 디용고레스 셈두와세데 셈게위시로소와 제야 잠바다 제와다 현례 판비섬 당라다 네 탈바다 탐지기면 토베기 네 듬바기야 자주 셈게 어디서 내 계획이 삼다 자산 셈두와시 제 계획이 저산데네 셈두와 될라테네 아주게 네 디기두고레제 디기용고레 대인자당 셈두다 미두와 테네 네 디기다 동아세 용고레제 당아주 셈두이기 탑람로시다 아주 냠는지야 돼 간치고레센 당아주게 라마 Chöpa 디위 돈에 셈두이 탑람 안냠는 제다 림바디 당아주 된마 온도 슈거와
Good evening. We all want to experience happiness and be freed of suffering. And whether we are experiencing happiness, or long for happiness, or unwanted suffering, depends on our mind. In particular, whether our mind is subdued or tamed or not. If our mind is untamed, unsubdued, that means our afflictions arise and dominate. And the mere arisal of an affliction, such as attachment or anger, causes suffering. The mere arisal of affliction, let alone the acting under its influence. However, on the other side, if our mind is tamed, is subdued, then our mind is peaceful and calm and suitable to cultivate great qualities such as love, compassion, definite emergence, bodhicitta itself, and wisdom realizing emptiness. Here in our text, where we're looking at the method, the practice of the Lama Chöpa, this is a skillful method to tame or subdue the mind. And we've been looking at various practices to accumulate virtue and purify as well, and that's all in order to tame or subdue the mind.
Lama Chöpa di thone anjo sim duwe tapsi des da sim gewi chuso droyagi nyamlen chege rimbadi anjo je kapla anjo ge jida anjo dangbo samda da nyamlen chi de komja da de negi da anjo Lama Chöpa ge lamen na je nyamlen samle de ba ina nyele anjo ge da jin de myun de jida ne je ne ha ji dor jawa sa da ane je Chöpa yome ba sha ba sa da 안지기 된 대화를 두지 가서 구성투기 된 잠바 내 된 대화를 두지 류 남나 최된 이거네 안도신의 되고 그래야 돼 당보를 림바티체 안디제라 아니 개비스다 되는 야 gem조 해야 되지 어도시로 와다 나고
So when one is engaging in this practice, one could do so on a regular basis or sometimes also in retreat. One often will start each session with this, or each day. And there, one will ensure that the preparatory practices are done. There are 6 of them, and they include ensuring that the place of meditation is clean. One has a properly arranged seat. One's shrine is also clean and arranged, and the offerings have been attained in a faultless manner. And then that one sits in the required posture. So there are 6 of these preparatory practices. And thereafter, one engages in mental development, starting with cultivating the mind of refuge. If one is doing retreat on any topic, these 6 preparatory practices are the same and need to be followed.
nang chö dan chö se jing yi la ba che go wa nang chö ma ho nang chö se jo nang chö dan chö se jing yi la ba che go wa chö je chö be je mang bu jo pu ye ge chö be je so chö je ti se jing yi la ba che go wa
Thereafter, one reflects on emptiness, and one also, before engaging reflections on emptiness, one makes supplications for inspiration or blessings to one's Yidam, engages in meditation on emptiness. Having meditated on emptiness, then one blesses the offering substances, both the outer offerings as well as the inner offering.
And these Yeladang Zidirwa, Yaji, Nobany Samtaji, and Nobangalea, Soshin Satab Yadra, Soshin Satab, and Soshin Satab Jande, and the Yesheba Dinu Shujema, Soshima, Dimpiki, and the Dushina Comia de Chagorwa. Soshin Satab Je, then the Yesheba Dinu Shuje, Yesheba, Dinu Shu, Soshima, Dimpiki, Mobaja Comia de Chagorwa.
Thereafter, one again reflects on emptiness, and from emptiness, one generates or visualizes the merit fields before one, as we have on the cover of our book. And having generated or visualized the merit fields, then one invokes the wisdom beings to come and abide within the visualized beings.
Mande Puya da, Andusin Mande Puya di Chagorova.
Thereafter, one engages in the varying process on offerings, including the offering of a mandala.
And the negative Dijelia, and down to get so that in March. Yangla Dunju Kone, and a chicken on the Chopa the Chagore.
The performance of offerings is the first of the 7 limbs that one engages in. So this in our text expands over a number of verses.
And the negative water, Denia and Delia, and Yana Dunju Kone said, Tambo, and the Diva Shaba. Gawalachi so Irawa, and the Chukolo Kura Soa Debanya, Casanyanga Soa Deva, and the Gawalachi so Irajabada, and Gawangoa Tikichagorua.
And then one progresses to the second of the 7 limbs, so this would be for us verse 38, and that is that of confession. And this then is followed by the remaining 5 limbs: rejoicing, requesting to teach, requesting to remain, and dedication of merits. So thus far we've covered the preceding verses. We are now on page 7. And last week we came up to and concluded the verse 38, that on confession, the third of the 7 limbs. And tonight we will look at verse 39, that in rejoicing, rejoicing in virtue or rejoicing in merit.
Milam Jin Jeba Tamjiki, Derajian Cheve Namgala, Daja Sambatevi Irang Moseji.
Verse 39. Though all things are like a dream, lacking inherent existence, I sincerely rejoice in the bliss and joy of all Aryas and ordinary beings, and in every virtue that has ever arisen.
And Jidang Jugi Gawa, Jeva Yamlin Chidu Kabla, and Gulon Chanju Semna. Jimju Gunia and the Delia and the Yang, and the chicken Zuga, Dombany Samdanche, and the Jesu Iranchi, Kawatela, you Jesu Iranchi, Kawa Yudikena, Rashi Madubare Seda, Gawa, and the Jesu Iranchi, Gansa Koroine, and the Rashi Madubare Samdamada, and the Jesu Iran Koroya, and Jesu Iranchi. Lokoron, Iran, Lokoroya, and the Rashi Madubare Samdaje, and the Casa Korsum, Dembar Mamuba, said Dinik Samdaje, Janju Semna, Dombany Samdaje, and Jesu Iranchi, the Sungorua. Janju Sim Gunya Laje. Tambo Kuno Janju Sim Gunya Laje, ne Tomba Korsum Den member some Daje, Duchen, Hisuira Chigo Regerma.
First one generates generates bodhicitta, the motivational bodhicitta, then recalls once again emptiness, or cultivating or generating the wisdom realizing emptiness. Thereafter, one has the required prerequisites to engage in rejoicing. So the practice of rejoicing includes the reflecting on the emptiness of the three spheres. In other words, the object, in other words, whatever it is that one is rejoicing in, that is empty of inherent existence. The act of rejoicing itself, so that consciousness, that mind of rejoicing, it is empty of inherent existence. And thirdly, the third sphere, the person, the practitioner engaging in the rejoicing, that they too are empty of inherent existence. So the act of rejoicing incorporates all three spheres.
Disigdwa Chenam Rashin Tsema Dandra Yang Sidu Chenam Rashin Tsema Dandra Yang Che said Chenam said Kowi Dubi Che Dan Ane Nyanganle Koale Debigi and Che Tamje Sigure Chaza Ane Donda Dujabana Kowa Dan Koal Cordia Kowi Dubi Che Dan Koale Debi Che Ganichi Chaza and Rashin Dubigi Rashin Dubi Tomba Rashin Madubari so Tsema Dara Chenam Raja Tsema Dara Yang said Sik Dorju Shiva and this Rashin Dubi Tombare Rashin Tombare Siguro.
Just before I commence with Genla's commentary, just to say the order of the Tibetan and English isn't so precisely matched, so sometimes it will come across a little mixed in English. Now going to the commentary. Though all things, so all things or all phenomena refer to all phenomena, those both to be found within samsara and those beyond samsara. In other words, those of samsara and those of nirvana. So all phenomena lack, and now for us in English we go to the second line, lack inherent existence. So all phenomena, whether of samsara or of nirvana, are empty of inherent existence.
Jidan Che Nam City, the Che Namla, the Koi Dubada, and Koal Debi Che Malan, Che Shazala, Che Nam Che, and the Sina said Kugurwa. And Dandalang and Zuge, the Che Nam City, Koi Dubi Che said, Mazu Koaki, Nyomoba, Leda, Nyomoba Seda, and the Diki Gudi Leda Nyomoba, Della Dene, and the Koal Markin, and the Chiki Koi Dunga, and the Chiki. Sashi Dunga Pumbo Sada, Della Dene, and the Chick Guru Dunga, Chavatu Dunga, and Dunga Dunga Soba, and Della Ninga Chiki Zembul, Sasheta, Kambada, Rirawa, Kankim La Soba, Manzu Beja, Longjola Soba, not so much in Gurova, and this and Della didn't do it, and Koi to be chair Sacher. Now, this is Chaza, and Dashin Jibit, and Rangung and Maduba Rashi, Maduba Kanya, Esurova. 나 디나진다 코발에 대발라도 야는 저기 뭐야 탈바 톱지게 탈바 탐지기 뭐 고방 토예게 담 달권주스나 접수주비 잠조 아니 지야 매중 고미하당 아니 지기 잠니지 코발에 죄게 탑람네 가려요래서나 안다고 권주스나 접수주비 잠조세야당 안 잠조지야래 아니 지기 코발에 탈두기 탈두기 예중기야래 디 아니 안자슈 잠 이제 자슈 셈고미야 아니 지소 파진 중에 냠렌지야 동방에 두벼 람 냠렌 대소 냠렌 제발에 때네 탈바다 탐지기 먹고 도구로와 디 냠렌지 탈바 톱지기 탑디지 디 냠렌 제발에 때네 탈바 톱되게 탈바 톱사와제 탈바 톱내냐 수수기게 똑배게다 람기림바 냠렌다 똑배치 차상 코발에 대비치에서 코발에 대비치 지상한테 최대리야 대세니신 코와 그런 거 대비지 지당 코발에 대비리치 디수 차상 가리시네 디수 차상 안에 갈래 랑응원이 주바서 요 말에 라신이 마주바래 덴바마 주바 짱야래 해서 최남나서 참마 다려야 세도나 디시고래 코발에 절외치 타바 지금 말 코월을 주위 최세도 코월을 주에게 탑람 남게 림바 냠렌제 근데 냠렌 제비 냠렌 림바제 코월을 주에 세네 방 코월을 탈발에 털사비 람 냠렌 디스차상 코월을 초치 제거와 당아주 Dambo Nyomba de Dene Lesa, Dene Kowala, Dene Duano, Corvi, Jason Cho Nicharudo, Chesan Koal, Yang Debigi, Cho Chiche, Ko Yang Corvi Church, Cho Chiche, Nichagua.
Just to correct my translation in the previous segment, I mentioned all phenomena, or all things, refers to everything that exists within samsara, and I also said once, I think, that nirvana. So nirvana wasn't said, it's all phenomena within samsara, and those going beyond samsara, going beyond the mundane. So now to go to Geshe's commentary. So all phenomena, again, refers to everything that exists, and the phenomena then are divided into two, those bound within samsara and those going beyond samsara, or going beyond the mundane. So those that are bound within samsara are classified as having arisen from the cause which is contaminated karma, accumulated under the influence of the afflicted minds. So everything that has arisen in this way is bound within samsara. For example, our aggregates, our body and our various consciousnesses, the various types of suffering, the suffering of physical mental pleasure, the suffering of physical mental pain, the suffering of transient pleasure, and all pervasive suffering. All such illustrations are objects or phenomena bound within samsara. And moreover, all the material objects that we utilize, everything physical, or not physical, everything of form or material that we utilize, this too is an illustration of an object bound within samsara, because the cause was the ripening of a karmic seed which is contaminated because it was accumulated by a motivation that was infused with afflictions. And all these phenomena of samsara are empty of inherent existence. They are empty of being established by way of their own defining characteristics. And the second category of phenomena, those which are going beyond, so not necessarily the term we'd normally hear gone beyond, here we can think of going beyond. Those phenomena which are consciousnesses that are either leading to the state of liberation or the consciousnesses of the state of liberation. So here we think of consciousnesses such as refuge, definite emergence, love, compassion, bodhicitta, the wisdom understanding and the wisdom realizing emptiness. These are all the consciousnesses that lead to liberation and enlightenment. These are the phenomena that are going beyond samsara. And these too are empty of inherent existence, empty of being established by way of their own defining characteristics.
지나 차사 안에 라신이 마주바레스 템바 마주바레스 템바 주비 동바레스 그러와 지나 당한 쪽에 가르치고 왔으네 템바 주바세데 라신이 주바세데 간치 라고레스네 신치 라마되바 신치 라되 마되바 뢰파 샤바라 마되바 그런 거는 주되바 주바네 라신이 주바레 템바 주바레스 지나 데니치레 템바 주바세 지레 그러와.
So when you hear that phenomena, both of samsara and those going beyond samsara, are empty of inherent existence or empty of true existence, one would wonder then, so what is meant by inherent existence that all phenomena are said to be empty of? Phenomena, if a phenomenon were to exist inherently or by way of its own nature or essence, it would exist by way of this own nature. It wouldn't require anything else in order to exist, anything else such as causes, for example. It would be independent or self-powered or self-existent because it exists by way of its own defining characteristic, its own essence, its own nature. If a phenomenon existed in this way, independent of anything else, not requiring anything else in order to exist, it would be inherently existent or naturally existent or existing by way of its own essence or characteristics.
That Demba Druba said, Denichi, that Denichi Yomare, Chidi Yoribes, and Denichi Yomares. 지사 매바데 아니 매나 최디게 가는 시에서는 贤起了对呢怕略大呢有把的嘛多贤起了嘛对就略嘛大把给去看有嘛的时候的去那参嘛当然呀是去跟着去呢车上跟着有的是呢贤起了对呢有把的对呢主对把去对呢主把的了怕略大把是滴滴的略怕滴滴的是怕略大呢有把的嘛多贤起了对呢略大把怎么有把的嘛多贤起了嘛对把略嘛大把给去看有嘛的时候的那的
There's no phenomenon at all, anywhere, within the entire class of samsaric phenomena, or those phenomena going beyond samsara. There's not a single phenomenon that has ever been found that exists in this way, by way of its own nature, self-existent, under its own power. But phenomena do exist. And how so? Well, they don't exist under their own power, but they exist dependent on others, in particular, independence on imputation or labeling or designation by mind. Everything that exists in this way, dependent, not independent, dependent, in particular, dependent on labeling or imputation by mind.
직뒤에 셰베나 최근에 지내야 강라야 마되바 랑고문을 줍드바지 강라야 마되바지 줍드바지 싸우기네 매 섬야들이다데 저놈을 삼마달아야지.
The first line then in Tibetan, which as I've read is spread across the first two for us in English, is in brief, all phenomena without exception are empty of inherent existence or separated free from inherent existence.
Dine zadan ngaju chue ngaju le nangdu kabliya kanis nangore sen nangdu kabliya ane kala ma de bokorong ngni drup de ba nangores jiza nawa na shin ji donda le yore besene jeba china nye yo ma ese orda.
Despite no phenomenon existing by way of its own nature, this is how phenomena appear to us. Whatever phenomenon appears to mind, whatever the object of our consciousness, object of our thought is, it appears to us as if it is self-existent, exists by way of its own nature. It really exists in the way that it appears. That is how phenomena appear to us, that the way that it appears is how it exists. Everything appears to us in this way. But when we search, investigate this phenomenon to see if it does exist in the way that it appears, as self-existent, it has its own nature or characteristics, no such nature or characteristics can be found.
do something ha said something gal jinga zo phungbo de la ka ma tyo phungbo di de ti so lo so jinga said ji je phungbo de la ma tyo ba jinga se koron ji drup de ba ji yo ba jinga zo lo lia chergo lo ba ji san di sha wa na shin ji ga zo nga said the canis do said ba sim ju je de ka bla phungbo di nga zo su gi phungbo na so ye phungbo di number shi phungbo nga de le lo so nga said surdu nye je yo marda ja nye ji me bare de nye de ji me bare de me na anda da ane phumbo nga di ki na ne phumbo nga na ne ane nga sa de kakri se de ji sugi phumbo de nga re bes ne dia mare soye phumbo de nga re bes ne dia mare dushi phumbo de nga re bes ne dia mare duji phumbo de mare number shi phumbo de 지상 phumbo nga ne ka number shi phumbo nga bo chasan nga de mare 지상 da de ne du ji 지상 nga se di 풍봉아 보레레네 나레요 말에 풍봉아 딜레 로송 가지 여러베스 고 로송 딜레 고 타제와 메베기 가지 여러베스네 재미 된신 가지 요 말했어 요만 예요 말 그래서 디디네 주제되는 나디 풍봉아레 풍보레 고 로소 재미 된신기 저메되게 가지 예메 내 풍보고 레레네 나레베스 디하레 메메 그래서 도시 제받은 나디 대신 아주 나와 나신 제와 풍보를 마주해 보고는 줍대 나와 나지 요르데 되니기 싸우긴 예매 말이야. 다들 두시는 가르 ngati ganis du la bi dang du shim ji de phungpo la due che lue pa da ba zam yi ba cha go le ben nga zu phungpo di gang ba gong ba zu pa zu zhuo de ge le ko zhu du si de nga zhu gu ye si ji zhen di phungpo la due che pa lue pa da sha ba cha de be ge la nga de ye phungpo de gu gyo ma da ji ji de nga de ye ji zhen phungpo de la da ji lue pa nga se pa da ba zhen yi ba le ma do ji zhen nga se di xian pungpo le due ji le da ba zhe ma yin ba nga se di zhe ne nie me de ge ji se wu ro ji de ne ge yong gu ro de ne du xim ju che ba ne man zu ge du chi ne le xian ji le due ne le da ba zhe yue ba di ngi de de sam da ba ne le la ha go tu go ji zhen de ne ge ha go yo de di ge sam la da na ri ba di da ga che pungpo nga de pungpo da che ga ne ji le sam da ba ne da na ji ba ha go tu go le
If we take as an illustration the self or the I, the person, our sense of self appears to mind, so if it's an object of thought, it appears as if it is separate from our aggregates, something that's always been throughout this life unchanging. But our aggregates, our body and mind, clearly has changed, but the self appears unrelated, something separate. But if we investigate to see if our self exists in the way that it appears as something unrelated to the aggregates, as existing by way of its own nature, no such self can be found. No self that is independent and unrelated to the aggregates can be found. We see that there is a relationship between the self and the aggregates, despite the self appear innately, naturally appearing as if it is unrelated, independent or separate from the aggregates. But when we investigate, we see that there is a relationship between the self and the physical mental aggregates, the body and mind. And then when we investigate further, we also come to see that the self or the I, the person, is not identical with any of the aggregates either. I am not my body. I am not any of my consciousnesses either. So when we investigate, we come to see that the way the self appears as independent is not how it exists. Something as existing by way of its own nature, we can't find any such self-existent self. We see that it clearly cannot be independent of our body and mind, our aggregates. But also, when we continue to investigate, we see it is not identical with our body and or mind. But that though, so whilst we see that the self does not exist in the way that it appears, it's empty of existing the way that it appears, it doesn't mean the self doesn't exist at all. We are not non-existent. But then how does the self, the person, the I exist? The way that it exists is as a mere imputation or label by mind onto the basis, which is the aggregates. Sometimes one of them, sometimes more than one of them. So a consciousness labels person onto one or some of the aggregates. For example, if we are asked, have you seen so-and-so? And say, yes, she's over there. So we're imputing that person onto her body. Onto her form, we impute that person. Likewise, onto consciousnesses, how we are feeling. We impute ourselves, our I, onto a particular feeling. And we identify with that feeling. But that feeling is not the self. Merely a consciousness labels the person onto another consciousness, a particular feeling. So this is how we can come to recognize, firstly, how the self appears. Secondly, it does not exist in the way that it appears. Thirdly, the way that it does exist is merely as an imputation or as a label by mind. So I feel that it's a lot easier to recognize this with our self, with our I, because this is something that is central to all our thoughts. But when you get when you get familiar with this process, you can apply it to all other phenomena. all other phenomena, whether phenomena of consciousness, other persons, or material phenomena, all appear in the same way. Through analysis, one finds they do not exist in that way, but they do still exist, and they exist in the way that has just been presented, labeled by mind.
And then the word milam jishin jeba tamchi yise milam jishin siore. Just a milam jishin sitting on the nilam nalia and the jig pechik be sajetan and jimedo dumrala so bad in the be ninju champion ninju shoes towene nilam nalia when you are which then go de in a ni say to jikjeva chena de shi nilam the mother when now an ashinji zao in the yomares. Just not the nilamlia when you are then go de in a ni say do the when you are now an ashin zao in the yomares. And Dina she church and it's now to know do Gala Shanjila Motu around when the Juba Nangor now to now an Ashinji Cheba in the near yomares. She's a milam the Chibares or Milam Chishin said.
Starting with the second line in Tibetan, which for us now is in the first line, though all things are like a dream. So this term, or this analogy of phenomena being like a dream, or things being like a dream, is very useful, because we know from experience that whilst we are dreaming, what appears to consciousness, appears to our mind, appears to us as if this is real, this is true. For example, if we're dreaming that we are in a beautiful natural environment, during the dream, this appearance appears to be true or real. But we know after that dream that what we dreamt of did not exist in the way that it appeared at all. And this is an analogy for every object of consciousness, in particular in our waking life. That every object of thought, everything we are thinking about, whether it's something we see or hear or taste, or something we are recalling or thinking about in the future, everything we're thinking about appears to us as if it's true, real, that it exists in the way that it appears. Just like that beautiful environment in the dream, whilst we are dreaming, we're at the ocean side or in the beautiful forest. But when we investigate, we recognize it doesn't exist in the way that it appears at all.
And che kanishna kon nyema kane shuna dagara ma do yuo zhuo kine yo ma de shi de. Chi sa rashin ma zhu ba yin za ko xian ji le due ne zhu gu yo ba zna xian ji le due ne ane zhu gu yo ba zan xian ji le due ne yuo zhuo ye de ge. Xian ji le due ne jie yo ba. Jie le den den ni zhe wu jie yo ba. De le de ne ane ji di yin yo yo ba. An du shi ne xian le due ne zhu gu yo ba. De ne zhu gu yo re shi de. Just think Digi Shigo is a Shen La Duene, and Temper Truba in a Yua Kaya Trail Mares. That Temper Matuba Rashi, Matuba is not Judan again, Shen La Duene, Jugor, Shen La Duene, and Digi Tuya Yore, Kudunga Yong, just a Digi Tuya Yungur.
If phenomena existed in the way they appeared, by way of their own nature or essence, they would have two characteristics. One being, they would be independent. So they'd be self-existent, not be influenced by anything at all, such as labeling or causes. Moreover, not being influenced by anything at all, there'd be no impetus for them to change. They would be unchanging, completely static. But this is not how phenomena exist. But if they did so, this is how they would exist. If they exist by their way of their own nature, they would be independent, in other words, not influenced by anything at all, such as labeling or causes, and they would be unchanging. So if we take an illustration, the consciousness of happiness. If we take this as see how it appears as if existent by way of its own nature, and therefore independent and unchanging. But we know through reflection that happiness does not exist in this way. It comes about independent on causes. So it's not self-existent, but dependent on other, and the other being causes.
그래서 되네 밀렘 지지 개바 탐지기 내가 지리한 체외 남가라스 다자 삼바타비 이랑오 시대 개바 시대 개바선 소소기 보시네 파바 시대다 바베 강사 아니 탐지기 시대다 될이야 내가 탐지라도 파바라 상기에 파바 전주심바 파바 아니 년도 랑게 파바 아니 년도 파바 시네 파바 시용거래 안디 다디게보 소소게보 시대 소소게보 다 솔람바다 졸람바다 안디면베 람라마슈베게 아능아주게 예 소소게보 어디 탐지게 개와서디 개바 탐지기 디기 주에 집에 대가 지지한 집에 남가라 시대 대화당 가이디 주에 유 개회 자와 지설야 안 삼바타바네 네 이라지수 이라지 인스라 삼바타비 이랑 뭐 어세데 돌뒤나 디시고 돌뒤시 슈샤바나.
The next two lines then together. I sincerely rejoice in the bliss and joy of all Aryas and ordinary beings, and in every virtue that has ever arisen. So here, this expresses what is being rejoiced in. So it's referring to all the bliss and joy in the continuums of all Arya and ordinary beings. So being all Aryas, it refers to those of all three lineages, whether of the hero type, the solitary realizer type, or the bodhisattva type. All Aryas are their bliss and joy is rejoiced in, as well as the bliss and joy of ordinary beings. And here ordinary beings will refer to those on a path, such as the path of accumulation, or on either of the paths of accumulation or preparation, as well as those who have yet to achieve a path. Beings, whether they are of the inclination to the small scope, middling scope, or the great scope, all ordinary beings, their bliss and joy is also rejoiced in.
개파시도 소소기보나 파베 가사 탐지게 사베 개와라 지수이란 지긴시도 건조 개와 사바 개와 제발 융아 이숨 요건에 건조 개와 제발 빼 야고래 삼매들이다 소소라는 게다 빼네 소소기 파베 가사다 소소기보다 가사 탐지 융아 이숨 요건에 개외 사바들 빼 야고라 삼베기다 두 삼다야 될다 게 지수이라세 도르드네 디마 디레다 직두이셔만.
That we abbreviated all the virtue that has ever been generated by both ordinary and Arya beings, in that we are generated. And whether that virtue is accumulated through physical actions or verbal actions or mentally, we rejoice in it.
다양한 지금 돌뒤 삼단 다양한 소소기 뒤수다 되게 지금 개발을 삼다와이나 내 상기에서 다 삼다와이나 변의 상기기 상마인엘이야 아니 장주쇼도 셈게 아니 잠니지곰 잠니주곰네 아니 장주쇼도 셈게 장주쇼도 셈게네 되네 파진주게 냠난제 아 되네 두시네 아니 상기기도 상마인엘이야 근데 남지 림바 냠난도 저는 개와사바래 디스베 개와디치 개와사바 디디키시티게 삼다 되네 상기기 심전 되네 냠네제네 상기 고방 톱 체외제라 상기 고방 톱네다 켐바 탈켐바도 또바 이 푼순 소바 규례 개와디게 삼다 다되네 상기네 상기기 현래 최기 콜로 최송제 최송네 최디 년개다 지게 년제 퇴섬 공숨제네 다 장슈선바 파베 가사다 지시스 소소기베 가사 대지긴 냠네 집에 개와 빠도메 바요레스 개와디게 삼다 되네 아니디 최년개 아니 랑자다 년되다 안디멘비가 람라마슈베 가서 소소기보 대수기도 전에 개와사제 배 약보레스 비게 되네게 약보레스 개와도 삼다네 약보레 삼다 다 되네 개와사바 대술레 되네 아니 몽바나 가령었네 류대와다 셈기와 가이데스야 가이데 지리야 제베 남가라서 가이데스로 지나 대가스로 대가 지리야 제 남고 대와나 가와스 개와 대수사발라 되네 체텔레 대와 아니 셈 기와다 셈대와다 류대와 아니 셈라 가와요야 안디 되고 몽바네 아니 지 되기 가와 가디요야 두시네 대수샤산 빼야보레 삼바진 두시네 야보레 삼바 삼다에들라 다고 개와라 지수이라 와세.
The rejoicing in the merits that has been accumulated by all beings can be done in a brief way or an expansive way, depending on the time one has. So if we take, for example, the Buddhas in general, the historical Buddha, we can start by recalling the training that being would have gone through in order to become a Buddha, generating definite emergence, understanding the sufferings of samsara, and thereafter, through relating to the situation of others too, generating love and compassion for all beings, developing that into the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta itself, where the being that would become the Buddha, determined to become a Buddha for the sake of all suffering mother beings. Having generated bodhicitta, then the long training in practices such as generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth became perfections, because they were now in the continuum of a being where they were conjoined with bodhicitta. And in this way, the bodhisattva progressed through the varying paths, cultivating first the path of accumulation, then preparation, and then seeing within the continuum and progressing until enlightenment itself, the fulfillment of all their aspirations to become a Buddha for the sake of others was achieved. And then, immediately arising as the four bodies, with a perfected wisdom, compassion, and power, engaged in enlightened activities, teaching the Dharma, and benefiting beings in perfect accordance with their own individual personalities and dispositions. We can also, time allowing, reflect on the great virtue and deeds of bodhisattvas, as well as those of the Hira and solitary realizer lineages, as well as all those ordinary beings. So in this way, we rejoice in every virtue that has ever been accumulated, and we rejoice in the bliss and joy that results from that virtue.
Dinege nat geba tamji geba na soso geba da pabe gaza tamji idan anjugi du sumdo sabaryu waside ma debi duge ne soso geba da pabe gaza digi gewa saba da debi negapgida chochuna shubigida soso geba da pabe gaza tamji gewa sa심be gewa ana maombana ane chige soso geba da pabe gaza digi ne gewa sabaryu gewa saya 데니게 개바디게 샤사 내가 지리한 체비게 내가 대화나 류 대화다 셈기와 가디기에게 윤규 대sol을 때네 개와 디사발을 때네 다들 세디나다 마오바이나 내가 기에게 대화들라다 류 대화 셈 대화 대한 내갑게 대화다 탈두게 대화 탈두게 대화 탈비고 받아 아니 사이고 봐 아니 가와대나 내갑게 가와다 탈두게 가와라서 봐 데니게 샤사 영화의 귀디 가르친 대소 다 개화사바 룽아 이스미 개화사바 데설때 용고래서 규제설때 용고래서 제가 데니기 규디 야고래 삼저 소소랑게 셈 삼바타바네야 야고래 셈비 삼다이다 삼바타비 지수이랑 어떻게 이 지수이랑 제타들 다 더드는 주산되는 책거래.
The third line in the Tibetan is in the bliss and joy in every virtue that has ever arisen. So in the Tibetan, those two segments are together. So here, when we rejoice, we call to mind all the virtue that has ever been accumulated, or as we have has ever risen, and that refers to across the three times what has in the past been accumulated, what is being accumulated now, and what is still to be accumulated by both sets of beings, ordinary beings as well as Aryas, as well as then not just rejoicing in the virtue that it has and is and will be accumulated, but also that because virtue is the cause for happiness, we rejoice in all the joy and bliss that beings have, are, and will experience. In particular, in the ultimate bliss of enlightenment.
추진 봄틱때 타여조대 판대 군대살 예단 윤도 내단 별외셔 삽기 추기 샤보 압도 솔로사.
Now we're looking at, moving on to the 40th verse, that of requesting to teach. Please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma from 100,000 billowing clouds of perfect wisdom and compassion to nurture, sustain, and propagate a garden of moonflowers for the benefits and bliss of all limitless beings.
아들야 불중 현재 니를 추진 봄틱시도 추진 봄틱라나 추진라네 timbalagora ngazo chaba yeden chu yeden ane timbatel siguro bum tricks the bum set be bum je janga bum sera da mango shura tik pasene de be na taye be dongba me ba namga chasan ya timba chu yeden chu chaba japcho yeden ba timba da namga chasan chapde ba yena ane ma chaba di 가제 갈리 버구로 와. 근데 timba 초질 마도 맨날 chaba 카질 chaba 요 말어 봐. 제가 되니기 배 진파 티 차상기 징게 강한되어 봐. 제 추유비기 징게 강한되어 봐. 되네 마 차버서 된 사지까지 간래 차버 봐면도 내려드네 지신이다. 안에 뛰어도 알아서 봐다. 되니기 차상지 기 연구로 와. 제가 추진 분식해야 돼. 니래 지단에 배도 추진해야 돼. 이나 다들 될야 다들 추진 분식해야 돼. timba를 구고만 된다 가르고서 상기기 투기 캠베 연된들 구고 캠베 연된들 구고 디로지 베네다들 풀중 켄제 아니래 다들 베디 자 시에나 디도와 다지니에 징기고 베디 마 시에다.
First line in the Tibetan is our second line, from 100,000 billowing clouds. So the expression of 100,000 billowing clouds is to conjure an image of just like a sky that is filled with thick clouds. With such a sky, when it rains, everywhere will be saturated. There'll be no ground left dry. The rain will fall everywhere without exception. So that's the purpose of this particular analogy.
So that
then would be the general meaning of this expression.
Lama rangi ya Geshe Rinpoche nam sardashi Lama Chöpa shen zhuo semje tamjali pa zewe samba tuje zewe samba jamba dan zewe samba di puljung tartukpa dires. Dadi chuzin bumchikpa sedo chuzin bumchik se da kempe zewe yondan da dimbar ma kenzege yondan Lama Chöpa kenzege yondan nyuba yondan di jamda zewe ki kenzege nyuba di da chuzin jik ma chuzin ki pa mingi daje semjan 탐질야 semjan 가실래 잠제제 가실래 잠제 매바 semjan 가능나 타이엘바 semjan 탐질야 잠바다 제와 제제 아니마 안지게 된마다 차바바비가 나신 마 차비게 된달라 아니 마 탈바다 탐제kim바 디기주베게 탑람 람 냠는 땡고래 해서 다든지 돈다지시고래.
The first line in the Tibetan continues from 100,000 billowing clouds of perfect wisdom and nectar, perfect wisdom and compassion. So in English we have this of nectar, it's not in the Tibetan. So here the clouds are just an analogy, of course, but what it is referring to is our Lama's perfect wisdom and compassion pervades the entire sky, so that his enlightened activities benefit all beings without exception. All beings without exception, with none excluded, will be led through his wisdom and his compassion to achieve their own enlightenment. Here we just have two, but there's a third quality also that would be included. It's not specifically stated, but the qualities of wisdom and compassion, and the third would be that of power. So these are all perfectly developed within the Lama's enlightened mind, and through these he benefits all beings without exception.
난 타이어 조디 판디 군디 차세데 다 타이어바 조와 심전 탐 제소다 심전 탐질라 심전 탐질라 네네 펜바단 대와 나 판디세디 류 지지가제 류 대와 심 대와 제 대와 세디 류다 심 대와 심 펜바세디 류리 판바 심 기보다 류 디기세 체거로와 데 군디 살세 군디 살세 지당 군달랍나 군디 살랍도 매도 꾸무다세야지 데니기 매도기 살스 베 망부여 봐다 그래서 베 망부여 닝제고 베 매도데 닝제고 데니기 매도 데니기 망부여 봐들라 아니 군디 살스 지당의 군디 살스고 지당 다데데 군디 살세데 군디 살세데 군다세야지 펜바단 대화디다 딩이 제 판단 펜바된 대화들 군디기 민 다제 펜바의 대화 야친 모습 주야지 세상 조화 심지 탐지기 류 대화의 심기바 아니지기 냠랭이 림바 판디기 아니지기 대화들 내갑기 대화다 탈도게 대화 펜바들 내갑기 가와다 판디 탈도게 가와 데니기 개체보 톱지게 탑지게 람 조화 심지 탐질라 아니 라마 결혼기 두시네 딩거 잠바단 지 원기 두시네 아니 딩거에서 오르다 땡제 녀마이나 땡제 탈바다 산지고 발 멍보고 차례 되누이네 딩거 멍보이네 땡보 유월에 사지 두시네 라미기 계셔 윤대 삼다 차고를
The second line in Tibetan is our final line, a garden of moonflowers for the benefit and bliss of all limitless beings. Perhaps instead of moonflowers, it can be translated as jasmine. So the analogy, the word we have, garden, is fine, but the idea is like a thick jungle, that you have the jasmine flowers where they are clustered together so densely that it's almost like a thick and deep wall of these flowers. And these are a visual representation, just like the clouds of the Lama's wisdom, compassion and love, benefiting all beings without exception, and benefiting them in the most profound of ways. So these represent here, the garden of moonflowers, the sentient beings that have been benefited, are being benefited, and will still be benefited by the wisdom, compassion, and power that pours down from the billowing clouds. So this then is the meaning of the illustrations here.
지난 군다세네 메도 구모다세 메도지 미래 다데갑데 군다세데 펜바단 대화들 고고래 메도 멤버지 펜바단 대화 지난 고 녀가를 펜바단 대화들 메도 군다기 수수 꾸에네 꾸바래서 그러지 지난 펜바단 대화들 살스도 빼 메도 두나 자치 무시월 빼 메도 슈에 봐서 지난 판디에 살스도 판디에 빼 뒤다 넘버 군도 가브리엘 판디에 여봐지 가브리엘 메어 많이 봐지 뒤다 넘버 군도 근데 여봐 여디게 판디게 베네 데니게 판디 주비하게 시골 판디 군디 살셔야 돼. 다디디가 판디에서도 내갑기 대화 판디 탈두고 판디에서 여러봐. 메도 이제 펜디에 메도 해야 돼. 메도 군다세 지다 메도 미래. 다디갑디데 군다세데 가르고서 판바데 대화를 고고를 해서 판다 대화를 고고를 해서 살세디 판바데 대화데 내갑다 탈도 무디네 여봐서. 땡자기 땡이 대화. 땡이 가디스 ور 땡이 대화. 가디.
So I'll try to say it a little more clearly than in the last segment. So the clouds symbolize the all-pervasive wisdom, compassion, and power that rain down, benefiting all the wisdom, compassion, and power of the Lama, that rains down, benefiting all sentient beings without a single exception. And then this thick and deep wall of jasmine flowers represents the resulting benefit and bliss, both temporary benefit as well as ultimate benefit, as well as can be considered physical benefits, physical happiness and mental happiness. This is all symbolized by this thick wall of jasmine flowers. And there's the benefit and bliss that arises within limitless sentient beings, both in the past that have already, and in the present are being, and in the future are still to be benefited by the rainfall of wisdom, compassion, and power.
Lama Chöpa kusung tu yuande, Kemba yuande, ane jige Kembe yuande, Zeo yuande, Nube yuande, Kenze jig Yachembo, ane jige Chodu Juba, Tartubaki, yuande, Tartubaji, Lama Chöpa yore as orda, Donadiso yore some, do some diet, Puljun Kenze, then choosing boom trick there, said the niggy. That young ane tired depending on the 대양 타입의 semjan tam 제 녀만의 대비 둘이야 semjan 망부질이야 안에 되게 제 최대한제 대화 디기 판대 주야기도 최대 냠는 제조제 띵기 대화담 띵기 안 디기 주야기 주대 망부 중요해서 안에 다대이네 안에 지금 판대 semjan tam 제리야 안에 편바단 대화 주야 누가야기 된다 탑람 남냠내 림바텐제 냠내 지티겐 베바도메바 요레스 베마시기다 직 개전 첨보도 남아도 시우리 세디 도실라미고 연대 구송투기 연대 도스체네 삼다의 차고렘.
And to summarize the first two lines in Tibetan, from 100,000 billowing clouds of perfect wisdom and compassion, then this is where we recognize in the qualities of our Lama's body, speech and mind, his qualities of wisdom, compassion and power. So the first line then, which, well, for us, perfect wisdom and, from 100,000 billowing clouds of perfect wisdom and compassion, here we recognize our Lama's qualities of body, speech and mind. Then the second line of the Tibetan, a garden of moonflowers for the benefits and bliss of all limitless beings. So here we imagining the results of his enlightened activities, the expression of his wisdom, compassion and power that have been benefiting beings in the past, now in the present, as well as in the future. And this is visualized through the presentation of a garden of jasmine flowers.
나디네 계단 윤도 내다 베위치 sabge chugi chaba abdu so sede ta lama kyorong de kenje nusum ge de nege yende yoba de lama kyorong ge da shenle zewe kenje nuba de ne yoba yinza ani geba da sede de nu gewe jawa ma gewa ma geba de ge le ya gewe ge dondal ya ani gewe dondal ya an du sin mu ti chen du sin lam de na ro che che song ro che sa ji da ani yundu sede da ge chawa de le ya gewa de yundu bu ma nyam ba che gyun 윤도 내게 윤중부 내게 된다 만년바 내게 된다래야 안데 대 개화디 양지 냠린 지집에 다 잠인지 규례 끼되게 베나 대설량 뭐 권역도 패하다 동방이 되별로 규례 깨봐야 뭐 권역도 패야 제사다 마게 반남라 끼비 된다래 봐 아니 끼에 차와디게 아니 윤도 만년바지 윤도 내야 된다 윤도 내야 아니 되게 만년바 내봐지 양뭐 권역도 패지네 아니 누원이도 저거 산지 고방 토예기 된다리야 깨다 윤도 내다 빌위치르 니치도 안에 삽게 추기 쳐봐 압도소 사바단 개치비 남기림비 남자들 봐 차바바 나진다 추기 차서 되게 최대 윤미체 봐 장소야 송로지 예세월다
The third line in Tibetan is also our third line, to nurture, sustain and propagate. So the term we have as nurture is more of to generate or to produce. So here in the third line, nurture, sustain and propagate, we are making supplications to our Lama that for ourselves and all beings, all good qualities that are yet to be generated, so we have here as nurture, but it's more generate or produce, may I generate them within myself teach me so that, in dependence on your teachings, I generate these qualities within me, as do all beings. And the second term, sustain, this then would refer to all qualities that have already been generated. May these remain for a long time. In other words, not degenerate. May they remain for a long time. So again, for ourselves and all others. And then the third, propagate. This is maybe better translated as to increase. So the good qualities that have already been generated and are remaining or sustained within us, remaining within us, may these increase. And those that we are to generate, when they are generated, may they too increase. And we're making this application then for all. Then that's a third line. Then the fourth line in the Tibetan is our first line. And this again is continuing the supplication to the Lama. Please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma.
다 sabje sabala de tombanyi namjati tinro che sugurwa sabas gebala ne nganjuge dinge joda ane jamni je janchu sem ane phajin juge nyamlen jimba tsujun soba zunri samden la soba ondu se ma ni geba desu jesan sunro che yesida jesan ta jam nge joda jansem janchu sem jamni je janchu sem jimba da tsujun la so nyamlen de yang zulia sunro che yes ane de phajin ge nyamlen 동방에 또 배셔라 동방이 고향을 줄야 누신 송로지에 세월다 나라 되니게 차상 사바다 계시벨라 미르마 차상 송로지에 세월
Between, at the end of in the Tibetan, at the end of the third line, linking to the fourth line is, we don't have it, but it's an in order to. So before I present what Kenda said in the explanation of the third line, of the fourth line. The fourth line in the Tibetan is this supplication requesting particular teachings so that we can, what we have in our third line, generate a realization and sustain realizations we already have and increase our realizations. So in order to do that, we then have the final line in Tibetan, our first line, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive teachings. Profound then refer to the wisdom teachings, the teachings as earlier in the class on the nature of reality, how phenomena appear, how they exist, the appearance and reality. So that's all included within the profound teachings. Then the extensive or vast teachings refer to all the other teachings. So those in relation to definite emergence, love, compassion, bodhicitta, the perfections of, for example, generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, and concentration, those first five. All of these are included within the extensive or vast Dharma, and the profound again are the wisdom teachings.
Nandala, Tanga Zuki Kiwi and Jawa, Garachebena, Tanga Zuki, Lama Chöpa Nyamlesia, Lamrimi Nyamlet, that Dunda Jiva Chadure, Jesada Dundala Zuki, Nedanga Zuki, that Jiki, Dusu Tuno Chinalia, Jiki, some down 2 years in some Tavina, and the Jogaya Lion, and the Jikilamsa, and Jiki, Jikunora, some conjure chase. Netse rangashe rangada semchen tamje ta jige dunga de digi ko ba de digi de ko dunga de trago inza semchen tamje mansaza de digi de dena sembege samlochi ta dunga da drawa sho sembege samlata dinegi samta and dinegi samta ne ta digi de daya da dunga le antichi digi de daya da dunga da daya de ta ji tablam roje de suili ngazo tabla dinge de sui dinge de la Sanyi Conjo, Kemio Conjosmi, Gyokuri, and the Semja Tamji, Dunale, Gyoviadi, Sui Gyokuri, Kemio Conjosmi, Gyokuri, Sembegida, Kemio Conjosum, Ken Sembegida, Deliana, Kemdora Shiche. And the Nizada, Digelia, that Semja Tamji, Digi Duya, Dunga Se, Tela, Dang, Jige, Kolam Yamlin, Digi, Juayagu, and the Jigi. Kewe Jawa to Panchen to Chimbala Soba Nyamle Cheada, Dunga Yumo Paya, the Dame about to be Shera Combala Dine, and it Digi Tuyada Dungal Troku, Dingy Tablam di Niji, Semja Tamjelia, 아니 저게 소수냐 저게 파신 쪽에 냠는 제 동화 대위 규사죠. 근데 동화 유교 녀모베 녀바 다음에 봐 땡제 다음에 봐 또베 땡제야 아니 건설로 검주신 냠는 제주시는 게 있으면 탐제 상이스로 거기 세베게다 심지어 탐제 동화단 자와단 디게데 템바데 녜지긴 세베 삼로지 있다. 내가 먼저 이바데 차르고와 안 디젤야 다 녜제발라 소소 다데 뉴바 가요 말다 지메반사 지상에 심지어 탐지게 상지에 고바 토바 마톰나다 근데 심지네라 데니게 펜바 개체무 투투사 말에 대인상에 데니게 펜바 개체 유튜브라 인지 메지다 상지에 고바 토고도 대인상에 심지어 탐지게 되는 상지에 고바 토바 쇼 토바 지인 셈베다 데니게 전주 셈데 고미아디 림반 숨바로 체거와
In this practice of the Lama Chöpa, the entire, all the trainings, the mental trainings that are found in the Lamrim teachings are condensed here. One can, through engaging in this practice, reflect on all the varying points of the Lamrim, and also do so in a way that is supremely skillful. First, when one's engaging in meditation on the Lamrim, first one can reflect how all sentient beings, any differences we perceive are merely superficial. Even at a slightly deeper level, we can recognize we are all the same. None of us want to experience even the slightest discomfort, let alone pain and misery. All of us want to experience only happiness and joy. There really is no fundamental difference between any being at all. Reflecting on that, how we are all the same, and that my own individual longing for happiness and wish to be freed of pain and misery is shared by every being and motivates their every action. We can generate the thought, may all beings, without exception, may we achieve a state freed of pain, a state freed of misery and problems, attain a state of lasting, stable happiness. But in order for this to come about, ourselves and all beings need a skilled guide teaching us, training us in how to identify the causes for happiness and suffering and how to cultivate the causes for happiness and eliminate those that would otherwise lead to suffering. And only a Buddha is able to lead us to full enlightenment, because only a Buddha can do so from experience. Here we can recall the qualities of the Buddha, extensive qualities of the Buddha, so as to generate trust and conviction that the Buddha is a reliable guide, particularly his teachings. And this way we now, secondly, generate refuge. Having generated refuge, we remind ourselves that the only way to spiritually develop is to eradicate the causes that will lead to suffering and to accumulate causes that lead to happiness. And therefore, I need to train and cultivate all the varying causes that lead to happiness, such as practices such as generosity, ethics, patience, choice, perseverance, and concentration. Not only do I need to accumulate the causes that lead to happiness, I also need to eradicate all causes that would otherwise lead to suffering, that would limit my wisdom. And therefore I need to cultivate also the wisdom realizing emptiness. And independence on my growing pile of merit, as well as my wisdom, and thereby these two combined, skill. I can help others. My interactions with others can be beneficial. Through my growing wisdom and compassion, my interactions with others will be ever more beneficial. But I am yet unable to help beings in the way they really need to be helped, in the accumulation of causes that lead to happiness and eradication of causes that will otherwise lead to suffering. So this then brings us to the third step. Here we develop a determination ourselves to become a Buddha. Because it's only a Buddha that has unobstructed wisdom and thereby can engage with others precisely in accordance with their own unique individual personalities and karmic backgrounds, and as a Buddha that has the all-pervasive compassion that would ensure that every being without exception is treated with the care and the kindness and the skill required. So here we generate bodhicitta. Previously, we would have reflected on wisdom, as well as the other steps of the meditation, such as generosity and ethics. Before that, refuge, and before that, seeing the coming to recognize the equanimity of beings, or rather, developing an impartial attitude towards all beings. So this is a skillful way to do this meditation.
다 산주고바 토바 쇼스베 셈제바 셈예 산주고바 토투고 마 지자 산주고바 토바라 초사 지바 장고고래 지자 초사 지바 장야리아다 저기 지바 초사 지바 장야기 유 당한 저기 때 개발전이란 게 안지 라마다 이담 산예 자셈 안지 라마 이담 오 예메도 토네란기 눈리야란 게 라마 네 라마스나 지게 결혼이 산예스나 결혼에서 배때한 좀 쇠대비야디 산유쯤네디 스타트업에네 디고레 라마 이담랑게 라마데 오디 인세다 산예데 디인세다 소양지 소소랑게 제르무치 스타트업네 소소랑게 라마 카레네 디 스타트업제 델리아 라마스나 결혼 산예스 결혼 되자 아줄리아 라마디 산예 탐지 용어 아니지 미 가서 라미용어 나시벨 라마시 인세베 Lama Yidam Sanyi Songo Yereme Yin Sembe Dela Deba Tsechidu Cheche and Deshi Sheba Nashin and Jik Denigi Lama Di Kenzi Newsman Kembe Yunden, Tsewe Yunden, and Chinlegi Yunden, and Nube Yunda Chasan to say the Yu, Sembeki Denigi Lama Delia Deba Tsechidu Cheche, Lamaya, and Sat up Lamalia Deba Tsechidu Che, the Zada Lami Dunia. And the nigga Tseju Chene, that the ring, and in a Simjatan San Yokoba Tobu, Tizan, Dini Tobalea, Lamigi, and Jiggy, Tadarang, Top Tuege, Lamigi, Chin Labdu, Samje, Mevacheje, and Delean, Susaragi, Tommy Samba Combine, and Milu Longe, Kesada Chibatam, Jeshala Tangi, Sambiki de Comia de Duscom. And Jichanjusim combine Simja Tamji San Yokoba Topper Show, Sambiki, Discomiade, that Tony Tao combine, that the Nigi, to Lama di Rangi Dunia, Sa Tapche, and Di Dunia, and the Nigi Sosuranagi, Jik Kariu, Chanjusem Comanata, Chamze Combinada, Tomba Nicol Combinada, Chimbi, Persian Duin Yaman, Religion Combinada, and Jiggy. Ya Lama Soa Tipsi, Lamigi, Tanga Saya, the many tired, got a deuce in the cage of Cardrubine, and Ducian in Tigorwada.
The meditation I just presented will be the foundational meditation of that particular session. Thereafter, one calls to mind one's Lama, Yidam, and the Buddha, recognizing that they are indivisible. There is no difference between them in nature. And here one can perform this visualization in different ways. One can merely visualize Buddha Shakyamuni, recognizing that Buddha Shakyamuni, all the Buddhas, including our Lama and Yidam, are indivisible in nature. Or, as is presented in this text, one visualizes our Lama in the aspect of Lama Tsongkhapa, with Buddha Shakyamuni at his heart, and our Yidam at his heart. Or one can even visualize one's Lama in human form, and then with a Buddha Shakyamuni and Yidam at his heart. Whatever one feels more inclined to. And then recognizing that our Lama, like all the Buddhas, has the perfected qualities of wisdom, compassion, and power, and thereby can act in the precise manner to benefit each and every being. So here now, with the basis of our previously generated motivation, now our visualization, a mind of trust and conviction in our Lama, knowing that in order to actually generate these minds that we aspire to, such as bodhicitta, we have to accumulate vast stores of merit and wisdom. Now we make supplications, requests to our Lama for blessings, or perhaps best translated as inspiration, for us to develop these qualities within us. One can make the supplications for inspiration through the recitation of verses that one finds inspiring, or recitation of mantras such as mani mantras, and then engage in a specific meditation such as on love or compassion or bodhicitta. But engage in the specific meditation of the session, having in this way first developed the foundational motivation, secondly generated the visualization of one's Lama and requested an inspiration, and then one is ready, one is open, one's heart is open to cultivate minds of wisdom or love or definite emergence readily, easily within oneself.
Dene an dijelia an gewadia ngoa kyashare da simja tamji da sanjo ko da di ngazo shogerchi samda dene ge gewa sa she gewa de simja tamji da sanjo ko to bi gyurgyu wa sho sa da shenlia pamba kyachembu je de bi gyurgyu wa sho se bi da ngoa kyadire.
One concludes then with the meditation with a dedication. And in brief, all that virtue that's accumulated and has been and will still be, may it ripen or serve as causes to lead each and every being without exception to full and complete enlightenment.
Da duje mangbura che so lele yoba yang ji Lama Chöpa na de ne ko tim na shin ji bangrim chen de samta ba de yunu tu duje yong da duje de ne thong ji le de du chen samta ta kom sha be na de ne cha sang ji changwa da che go ba.
The meditation I've just presented can be done in 5 minutes. That's as long as it took me to say it, and it takes that long to think it all. Or you can extend it a little bit and do it in more detail if time allows. And when you do have more time, you can do the Lama Chöpa. Because what I've expressed here in these few minutes is presented in an extensive manner in the Lama Chöpa. So, lives are busy. Sometimes one only has a bit of time, but at other times you have a bit more, and other times even more. So there, in this way, if you can sustain a daily practice, sometimes even if it's just short, but keep it sustained, keep those embers warm, then when you have more time, you'll be ready to dive into this in a more extensive way.
안지게 야고 제비 긴이 당아 차상 안지게 최시시야 고갑 야고라서 대자 당알이야 알아 삼다비네 안지게 두신의 신의 안지 경험 저기 되니게 깨진 제 깨진 라데네 알 차상 최시시야 단 예 고갑라버래 제상 알이네 안지게 손음사요 고고 야고라버래 안지 경험 저기 나당 아주 녀가 저리네 안지게 녀제 and the Jusunum so go Yaburavare, the Ninza, the Jozuki, Teriche and the Chasalian, and the Bear Yabures in the kitchen chair says some dachi.
So in a few minutes, we'll recite our final dedications for this class for this year. So just before we do, I first want to express particular thanks to all those who've made our classes possible. So here, I don't know the various job roles here, but the few that I know, I can think of our director and the SBC, as well as all the other staff and volunteers who make these classes possible. But also, for the classes to be possible, it requires all of us to be here. This entire dependency is required for the classes to happen. And so we've come together in this way, this Wednesday evenings over the course of this year, sometimes remotely, sometimes in person. But we have on each occasion accumulated vast stores of merit, and we have strengthened our Dharma connection together. And this gives me great cause to rejoice in our good fortune. And I encourage you to now rejoice also in our good fortune, as well as when we come to dedicate.
Adina Shenda, Denigi, Chushi, Gopra in that. In the years, Mevaning in the machine was that she to us Merwa, Deneza, and Delia, the chick me, Charangi, the years, Bear, Wuchunga, Chasaya, and the chick gets out to Yaki Pandoya, Wuchungare, and the Charangi to share.
And Genla then thanks the translator, because without a translator and his somewhat limited English, then these classes would have been rather quiet.
Adine, the Dang Chasangi, Gawa Yawasayore, and the Jitoan me, Subrim Cheta, Yarum Chedus, Yarum Cheta, Subrim Tujela, Dina, Gawa Saba, Dang Gawatia, and Gamoa Jare, Dineza, Dang Gawatilla, Dine Chidanda, Sangi, Tempa, Tawata, and the Tinzingi, Kibo Tamba, Kanishina Chasan, and Chiku Kusi Ringbutsada, and the Chiki, she do. Firstly,
we can dedicate all this virtue to all the holy beings across all traditions in the world, calling to mind particularly those that we are most connected to, such as His Holiness and Lama Chöpa. May all these beings who are working so hard and skillfully for the benefit of all, may they continue to abide in our world for a long time. May all their aspirations be quickly fulfilled.
Chopa da Machula Soba, the Nigi, and Chiglia, Chipa, Tichpa, Shije, Chasa, and Chasalia, Jamba, and Zewa, Jinan, Zemlia, Shidu, or Shaw, Setimonum Jared.
Secondly, may the world and all their beings abide in harmony and peace. Wherever there's external conflict, whether that is a conflict between peoples, whether between individuals, within families, or within society, or between nations, or where the conflict is such as physical suffering, such as where the body is not in harmony, and therefore illness is experienced, or other forms of physical suffering, whether experienced by humans or animals. May all beings generate love and compassion within themselves, and in this way, caring for others as much as they currently do for themselves, may all beings live in peace.
Simjin Digi da Simji Dunga Sege, Dundali, Chuki, Jawa Kandishina, Chasan, Lambda Yabu, and Jig Sambana Shinji Dunda Juba, Shung or Shaw, such a Molam Jad.
Using as illustrations of all activities in the world to bring benefit to others, may our Dharma Center, the nunnery, the monastery, and the stupa, and all other projects that are motivated to bring benefit to others, may their aspirations quickly be accomplished in accordance with the Dharma.
And Simjan Tamjig Dandalia, Sanji Goban to be Chirdu, and the Chi Momba, Chunium Nichet, Goya, War Show, Sevada, and Momba de Losebi Cablia, Dinigi, that Jinyamlin, Chuyan Shitty Bear, Chigin Sembik, and the Dumbaro Sumasona, and the Chigit Dumba, Dinigi, Gia, the Chimbochagore.
Thereafter, all our own individual aspirations and those all that we know, so what we are particularly aware of, as well as all those of beings, may they be accomplished in accordance with the Dharma. And moreover, opportunities such as these that are so rare in the world, may they become accessible to ever more beings. may the most suitable path for each and every being to spiritual development, to the generation of love, compassion, and wisdom, may these open and become accessible and available to all beings.
Alright, that didn't go to Losaba, Jobolero, Yare, and the Christmas, Jobolero, Yare, Chasalia, and Chasan, Chiki, Lucim, Diki Tonian, Diki Chasan, Gabu, Gibu again, that's something to
Thank you. You soon will be spending time with family for Christmas and New Year, and from now throughout this life, I wish all of you deep and lasting happiness, physical health, and mental and emotional calm and peace and happiness. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.